one thing that comes straight to my mind is Chopper. You put a lot of weight on for relatively speaking in terms of how you're sitting here today, but you put a lot of weight on for Chopper. Probably a lot younger too, or you were younger.
Yeah.
My God, you looked exactly like him though.
Thanks, mate.
I'm serious.
Yeah.
And you actually came across like him too.
Yeah.
Like it was amazing. How is that? I don't know anything about acting, but is that called method acting? What is that? Did you spend time with the dude to find out how he was?
I don't know. I don't like to put the label method acting on it because then I'd find out that, it's not method acting or it is. So I just go with what works for me. And what works for me, first of all, is having a lot of time to prep. Like you can't call me and say, we're filming next month, I'm going to pass on that project. Like I need things to marinate up here for as long as possible. Secondly, I have to respond immediately. Like when I read something or someone approaches me for a job, I know straight away instinctively whether I feel as though I can become that person. And if it's a no, it's a no. It doesn't matter what the project is, who's in it, who's directing it, how much it is. If I don't get that response, I'm out. With Chopper, I, for some reason, just immediately felt like I could become him, even before I'd started doing any research. And there wasn't a lot of material on him available at the time, but I'd seen a couple of interviews. So it was just a lot of research, mate. And we were ready, we were getting close to start filming. We were in early stages of pre-production. The film got postponed because of the Elle McFeast interview years ago when Chopper went on air slightly drunk and told stories. So that worked in my favor because it meant it gave me about another 12 months to prepare. So it was a combination of things, reading everything I could, watching everything I could, spending time with him. Andrew, the director, and I went down to Tassie and hung out with him for a few days. And then trying to come up with a version in my head that would work on screen because, doing an impersonation is not enough. Like it has to be believable, it has to be something else. So a lot of it's just up here and I can't explain everything that goes on up there.
Impersonations, you're right, it's not enough. Otherwise it probably doesn't come across quite good enough like, in terms of excellence. Impersonation it's quite interesting in that when I was reading somewhere that when you're a little kid, you did impersonations, whether or not it's true or not, I don't know, but like just to get a laugh perhaps or maybe get an audience. Like impersonation, is that something, you're good at, like in terms of impersonations, like how you physically stand, how you speak, the sound of your language, the accent in your language, the intonations and all that sort of stuff. Is that something that you love doing? You've always loved doing?
It's something that comes naturally, and my son has it as well, which is really funny to see that being passed down. It's not something I've taught him. It's just in him, like straight away. So I did it as a kid. I probably use it to get out of trouble mainly, to get in trouble at school and then get out of trouble at school. I occasionally would have teachers come up to me on the slide and say, "Hey, I heard you do a good Mr. So-and-so. Could you do it for me?"
Serious?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
So
I love that.
And my grandfather was very encouraging of it. And then I grew up, watching a lot of TV as a kid and watching a lot of American shows and British shows and just trying to do the different accents and stuff. So it was something I was doing without really being overly conscious of, without knowing that it was, kind of good training for the future.
So when given that that's something that's a skill you have, it's a thing you enjoy, it's something you grew up doing, when you got to go and play a role like Hector, for example, in Troy, which, by the way, I'm always been upset that Hector gets nailed.
Yeah, me too.
But seriously, like he's like a fucking superhero. Like like he's the best fighter for Troy's God, and he gets nailed unfairly. I thought anyway. But when you go to take that role on, do you then sort of put yourself into the mindset of someone like that, how you would interpret how Hector is or was? Because obviously you go and see Chopper. Chopper's alive, he's around. Hector's been gone for a long, long time. How do you get yourself into that role? Like, how do you start to think, how am I going to impersonate what the audience would think Hector is like? Or are you saying, I'm going to take to the audience who I think Hector's like?
Yeah, it's a combination of everything. So, talk with the director, go to the source material, look at the script. And then for Hector, it was really just primarily for me about just pure leadership, like a man leading an army and the army loving him, being the ultimate, type A warrior who had a heart as well. He just seemed, when I read the script, I thought there's something about him. It's not just type A, rah, rah, rah. And so I read all kinds of, like, I remember reading an Evander Holyfield book preparing for that, like a book on Romulus, all kinds of different things just to try and get different perspectives on leadership and battle and then, you know, going to that place. And I had a really good amount of time to prepare for that film. Wolfgang Petersen, our director, cast quite early. Brad was on board first, and then it was myself. And so I had a good amount of time to prepare, which I needed. A lot of horse riding, a lot of fighting.
You were doing that?
Yeah. Had to learn how to bareback and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, and it's just the best part of the job, which is going back to before. Like, if you said to me the film starts next month, are you on? One of the reasons I say no is because, to me, for someone who didn't study tertiary education, one of the highlights is that I get to go to school almost every time I get a job, you know, and that's my kind of favorite part of the job, is going away and learning and doing the research, so that then when I walk on set, I feel like I'm prepared, and I don't want to rush that, because that's the gift. And if you don't have that period of time, you can feel underdone or paranoid or whatever. You know?
And that'll come across, I guess.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, even if you don't like the film, here's the most important thing for me. What matters is that I believe in what I'm doing, because if I don't, I can't expect you to buy that for a second, and you won't buy that for a second. You'll see through that. So if I can just feel it myself and at least make what I'm doing convincing, I can't control a lot of the other elements, but I can at least hope that whilst I'm on screen, you at least believe what I'm doing. That's what's really important to me.
That's interesting, because I have actually read some reviews of other movies you've been in, and sometimes they might not have done as brilliantly as everybody expected them to, relative to costs and all that sort of stuff. I'm talking financially. But a lot of the reviewers said, but Bana did blah, blah, blah. In other words, you shone in terms of your role. And what's really interesting, you just talked about leadership. I'm just wondering to myself, is acting out a role, for example, Hector, or even Chopper for that matter, is acting out a role for, say, someone like yourself, is it about finding that one virtue or those two virtues, in the case of Hector, leadership? How can you express that particular virtue? Because virtue is what stick to us. I mean, I love seeing a virtue in somebody or something, like actually overextended nearly, like glaringly.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking about Hector, and I never thought about it at the time, but that's what stuck to me. Now you've explained it to me. Do you actually go looking for the virtue and then try and express it really strongly? And we will talk about how you've done it in Dry, because there's virtues coming out of that as well. But just on Hector, is that something you look for?
It's got to be in the source material. It's hard to just construct it out of thin air. It has to be there on the page. But then you're trying to add to it, and then you're trying to work out a way of tapping into what's there and amplifying it, or, you know, coming up with a different version of it. A lot of it comes from conversations with the director, and you hope you're on the same page. And then just, I think a lot of it's instinctual. I probably don't overthink it, to be honest. And then, you know, you got to get there on the day and have a play and try different things. And some things will work and some things won't. And you just got to experiment.
Maybe they're just natural virtues for you. I mean, if you don't overthink it. So if you're not specifically looking for it, perhaps, maybe, am I just putting it to you? Perhaps these are just natural instincts for you. I mean, maybe you saw a lot of leadership in your life. It could have been your dad. It could have been anybody, school teacher, whatever. Do you think that virtues are important to you? You know, all the usually like leadership, strength of character, you know, respect, blah, 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 all those sorts of things. A lot of these come out in your character, by the way. Aaron's, he has a lot of these virtues.
Yeah.
Are they natural things for you, do you think, today, if we just talk about that for a second?
I'm definitely mindful of them, 100%, you know, as a parent. And I love them, and I love those virtues in my sporting heroes as well. It's not just enough for them to be really, really good at what they do. I'm looking for something else in them.
Just skilled.
Not just skilled, yeah. I'm looking for something else that enables them to carry the team, you know, and lead by example, and just have that little X factor that's a little bit different to the guy that's just being able to do whatever they can do. So, yeah, maybe a bit of it comes from my dad, or, you know, other people that I've you know, noticed as I was growing up, or so I guess subconsciously there's probably a connection between, you know, that ideal and some of the characters. I've played some really awful characters too. Like I've played I played some absolute shockers who don't really have that side to them, and that comes quite easily as well, which is a bit scary. But so it's not always the case, but I guess there is a bit of a connection.
Because I mean, I don't want to go back to Chopper again, but Chopper's, some people would consider him to be, not a nice person. But what's interesting about the way you play him, you made him likable. He's funny.
There's no getting around that. Like, you can't hide from that. And it's what made the film quite controversial at the time, because people were uncomfortable with people laughing in the cinema at moments when they just, technically shouldn't.
Yeah, if he's holding a gun at someone or he's getting stabbed or whatever. I mean,
but that was him. Like, that was the easiest part to play because he was one of the funniest people you'd ever come across. And in terms of reading a room, mate, forget it. In terms of, like, distilling a character in 3 seconds, to this day, I've never met anyone who could look at a bunch of people and just have their measure within seconds. Know exactly what you're thinking, know how to manipulate you mentally, like, just unbelievable. So that's there. So you just try and work out, well, how do I capture that? I remember being so exhausted after I spent a couple of days with him, and I was like, how do I capture that? How do I capture that energy sucking persona of someone? So again, it has to be on the page. If you don't have the words to do that, if you don't have the freedom to try and exude that, you're limited.
What do you mean on the page? How do you mean?
So you can have all the intentions in the world, but if the script doesn't have the basic elements of a good story, if there are holes in the scene, if there are things that don't work, they don't work, and you can't fix them on the day. Usually, I like to have a crack at it if a scene's not working on the day, to say, hey, this is a bit long, or this is a bit boring, or this just doesn't work. And that comes with time. Also comes from a stand-up background, because when you're on stage, if your material's shit, guess what? You know about it really quickly, and you better fix it before the next gig.